Welcome to this explainer on how to fertilize roses effectively. I'm absolutely thrilled you're joining me today because, well, we're going to dive right into the fascinating science and the real practical strategy of achieving vibrant, long-lasting rose blooms. If you've ever found yourself just completely overwhelmed by those endless rows of plant food at the garden center, you are in exactly the right place. Let's start with a question right off the bat. Are you actually starving your roses by overfeeding them? I know, it sounds totally counterintuitive. We all kind of fall into this trap of thinking, hey, more fertilizer equals more blooms, right? But actually, blindly feeding your plants, especially if you're using the wrong nutrients at the wrong time, well, that can lead to severe root burn, weak, spindly canes, and ironically, way fewer flowers. It's a classic case of too much of a good thing, and fertilizing is really about supporting a living system, not just dumping chemicals on dirt. Here is our roadmap for this explainer. We'll be looking at 1. Rose nutrition demystified, 2. Selecting your fertilizer, 3. The seasonal feeding schedule, 4. Proper application techniques, 5. Troubleshooting common problems, and 6. Final tips and takeaways. Let's get right to it. Section 1. Rose nutrition demystified. Okay, let's dive into this. Try to think of your rose bush kind of like an athlete in training. It has very specific dietary needs to perform at its peak, and we really need to treat its nutritional needs almost like a human diet. So the very first thing you'll see on almost any fertilizer label is that NPK ratio. That stands for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. These are your macronutrients. Think of this as the main meal for your roses. It's the broad nutritional foundation that drives their core growth and development. Let's break down exactly what each of these big three does, because getting a precise balance here is absolutely crucial for a healthy shrub. Nitrogen, or N, that's the engine for leafy growth, shoot development, and that rich, gorgeous green color, driven by chlorophyll. Then you have phosphorus, the P. This one is all about the unseen heavy lifting. It drives root development, cell division, and most importantly for us, the flowering process. And finally, potassium, or K. This acts a lot like the plant's immune system and structural support. It improves stem strength, regulates water, and really boosts its stress tolerance against things like drought and disease. But you know, a rose cannot live on macronutrients alone. So let's look at the essential micronutrients. Think of these as your rose's daily vitamins. You got things like iron for that dark green leaf color, magnesium for chlorophyll production, and calcium for cellular strength. Plus, there are trace elements like manganese, zinc, and boron, which are needed in tiny, tiny amounts for enzyme support and flower formation. Believe it or not, a deficiency in just one trace element like iron or magnesium can weaken a rose just as much as a lack of nitrogen. Section 2. Selecting your fertilizer. Okay, now that we know what the plant is hungry for, we need to look at the different products out there to deliver these nutrients to your garden effectively. The absolute biggest choice you'll make is between organic and inorganic fertilizers. Organic fertilizers are derived from plant or animal matter. They feed the plants slowly, they actually cultivate a living soil ecosystem by feeding beneficial microbes, and they improve long-term soil structure. The only real downside, they take a bit longer to act. Inorganic or synthetic fertilizers, on the flip side, provide a really fast-acting, convenient, and highly precise nutrient spike. But they offer absolutely no long-term benefits to your soil health, and honestly, they can sometimes leave salt buildups if you overuse them. Now, what's really interesting about this is looking at the actual ingredients you might find in those organic blends. For a vegan, eco-friendly approach, you have fantastic options like alfalfa meal, which really spurs vigorous growth, and kelp meal, which adds over 60 trace minerals for stress resistance. Fish emulsion is another great natural option for lush growth. Bone meal is a classic powerhouse for phosphorus, but, and here's a quick warning for you, it can be highly attractive to raccoons and dogs. They might actually dig up your beds looking for a snack. And hey, if you ever have a confirmed magnesium deficiency, a simple boost of Epsom salts works wonders. Section 3. The seasonal feeding schedule. The concept I really want to emphasize here is synchrony over frequency. It's not about how often you feed, it's about feeding the rose exactly what it needs, precisely when it naturally needs it during its metabolic cycle. Let's map out the year chronologically. In early spring, once your soil temperature rises above 50 degrees Fahrenheit, the roots wake up. That's when you want high nitrogen to jumpstart leaf production, along with moderate phosphorus and potassium. As we move into late spring and summer, the plant shifts its energy toward blooming and managing heat stress. Here, you're going to want to dial back the nitrogen slightly and bump up the potassium. Finally, the golden rule of rest, you must literally stop fertilizing 6 to 8 weeks before your first expected frost. Pushing new, soft, leafy growth this late in the year is just a recipe for severe winter damage. You have to let the plant naturally harden off and enter dormancy. Section 4. Proper application techniques. All right, with the timing locked down, we're shifting focus to the physical execution of feeding your roses. I always recommend starting with a soil test every 2 to 3 years just to establish a baseline. I mean, you can't properly fix what you haven't measured, right? So here is a really simple, foolproof, 4-step granular application method. Step 1, tidy up any fallen debris and pull back your mulch. Step 2, sprinkle the fertilizer in a band about 6 inches away from the base of the plant. Step 3, scratch it lightly into the top inch of the soil. And step 4, water it in. Keeping those fertilizer granules away from the actual canes is incredibly important because direct contact can severely burn the roots and stems. Of course, granular isn't the only way to go. We have a few different application formats. As we just saw, granular requires that watering in to activate, but liquid fertilizers, which you mix with water, are incredibly effective for potted and container roses. Because nutrients leach out of pots so quickly, they need a much more steady, accessible supply. Then you have foliar feeding, which is spraying nutrients directly onto the leaves for rapid absorption. Just remember one crucial rule. Never apply foliar sprays if the temperature is above 80 degrees, or you seriously risk scorching the foliage.
Section 5. Troubleshooting common problems. Okay, even with the absolute best care, things can still go sideways. It's time to put on our diagnostic hats and act like plant doctors. And this brilliantly illustrates how we can match specific visual symptoms to their nutrient cures. If you see older leaves turning pale yellow, you're likely looking at a nitrogen deficiency. If the buds refuse to open or the stems seem weak, suspect a lack of phosphorus. What about scorched brown leaf edges? Yep, that's often a potassium deficiency. But check out this last one. If you have a massive, vigorous, leafy green bush with absolutely zero flowers, that is actually a nitrogen overdose. You've basically given it way too much fuel for leaves at the expense of the blooms.
Before we leave troubleshooting, let's bust a persistent internet myth. Should you dump uncomposted coffee grounds on your roses? The answer is a firm, absolute no. Fresh coffee grounds still contain caffeine, which actively inhibits root growth and seed germination. On top of that, they actually form a dense, impermeable mat on the soil surface that blocks essential water and oxygen from reaching the roots. If you really want to use coffee grounds, they have to be fully composted for several months first. Section 6. Final tips and takeaways. So the crucial point is bringing all this science and practical scheduling together into something you can actually use. Let's do a quick recap of the foundational rules to ensure you leave with memorable, actionable steps for your own garden. First, test your soil every 2 to 3 years so you aren't just guessing. Second, match your nutrients to the plant's seasonal growth phase, nitrogen early, potassium later. Third, never fertilize completely dry soil. Always water beforehand to prevent root burn. Fourth, stop feeding 6 to 8 weeks before your first frost. And finally, remember that your potted roses are going to need more frequent, lighter feeding than those in the ground. As a quick note, please keep our disclaimer in mind here. The advice provided in this explainer is based on extensive research and best practices, but garden microclimates vary wildly. Your specific regional conditions, soil type, and climate will totally dictate your exact timing and needs. It's always a great idea to consult with local gardening experts or extension offices for highly personalized advice. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder. Will you continue to view your garden soil merely as inert dirt? Or will you shift your perspective and start treating it as a dynamic, living ecosystem ready to be fed and nurtured? Because when you focus on cultivating the biology in your own backyard, the soil will feed your roses, rewarding you with breathtaking blooms year after year. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive.